Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Down Parenting, your English speaking podcast for those international families living here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. It's been a while since I've done an intro, it seems. And as always, we're your hosts, Eva and
Maren.
Today we have our resident psychologist, as always, Dr. Naomi Gibson. Hi, Naomi.
Hello.
Hi. So this is going out on Valentine's Day, and this is kind of a little Valentine's gift for anyone listening, kind of a way to showcase love and self-care and, our gift to you, as it were. Today's episode is about reparenting ourselves. This is a phrase I think so many people are talking about these days, and it kind of got me thinking, where did it come from? How did it get here? What's happening? And so a little bit of a research, it's kind of basically coming from like the 1960s, and there's loads of different levels of it. And it's basically about meeting the needs of your inner child and taking that responsibility of the parent that actually should have done it when you were a child. There are multiple levels since it began. So the first one was, how's it called? Total regression. And you lived with the therapist, apparently, which I find insane. But you lived with the therapist and they became your parents who help you get over it. That's not really done these days. Then there was a time-limited regression. So it was a case of you go for like multiple hour sessions for like 5 or 6 weeks, and the therapist would help you that way. Still kind of done today, but not so much. Spot reparenting, it's when you are focusing on specific events in your life and the therapist will help you out in those specific events to help be your reparenting plaster, as it were. But reparenting, self-reparenting, basically is about the positive pieces of the parenting ego within ourselves that we already have. And so it's basically us taking care of ourselves. This is kind of our way of kind of saying you don't have to go to a therapist, because you're getting free therapy from Dr. Naomi, as always. But it's a case of Dr. Naomi is going to help us, because for us international families living here in the Netherlands, or actually anywhere in this world, we actually have a double layer of becoming a new parent, because we already have this stressor of living in a different country with a different language. You might have followed your partner. Maybe you don't even have a visa to work. There's multiple levels of stresses that come with that. But then to become a parent, that's when you're bombarded with a lot more stresses, as it were. And so there's stresses upon stresses. And then this is when we're being triggered about how we're going to raise our child, what that's going to look like. And then that's kind of where this reparenting is going to come in, because we're not in our familiar setting. We don't have the support network of our family and friends like we would do back home. And so this episode is hopefully Naomi's going to basically shine a light to actually guide us in a way to help us kind of get there and to understand the concept, and maybe even give us some steps to help us bring that reparenting into ourselves and to give us a bit more peace of mind of being able to become that parent that we want to be. So with that, no stress. How is reparenting for you, as it were, Naomi? Is this something that creeps up a lot in your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. In my work with parents all the time, we're thinking about childhood and kind of the historical factors that go into things. But I think it sometimes looks like the therapist, myself, actually kind of making efforts to repair what would have been lost in your childhood. So, that could be even just somebody sitting and validating your feelings. If that wasn't something that your parent was able to do for many reasons, then that is a reparenting experience. You're learning that you can have difficult feelings, be uncomfortable, be angry, sad, and that somebody else will sit with you in that. Then that helps you to learn to manage that in yourself. Yeah, so often that looks like just what a therapist's role is. And that's where the historical models that you spoke of, that's what they would have done more kind of literally, like help the client through these problems and told them how to manage them like a parent would. Nowadays, therapy is taking on some of those same elements, but it's less kind of come and live in my home and I'll parent you in a way that you didn't have. Yeah, and then the idea, I guess, of therapy in a longer term way is that you're able to integrate your therapist's voice into decision making, and as an additional parental figure. And by parent, you just mean like a guider. That's what your parents are, aren't they? They're just people who guide you and hold your hand through life in a sense. Yeah, I still look back on my therapy that I had for probably 5 or 6 years as part of my training, but also to help with lots of difficulties. I still think of my therapist in such a warm way. She was so containing and she held me. And I often just think, what would Karen say about this? Or what would she think? Or how can I sort of integrate her voice into my decision making?
Well, that's the first time I've heard a Karen's voice being welcomed in someone's head.
Yeah,
Um,
she's a joyful, lovely Karen. She's not.
it's actually really interesting you say that. I hadn't actually thought about the therapist voice then being the voice in your head, because as many of us will know, like it's our parents' voices or guardians or whoever it might be that actually comes with us, and those are the voices we hear as adults.
Yeah, and they can oftentimes be so critical. You know, why have you made that mistake again? Oh God, you're always late, or you're always whatever. It's just kind of that constant criticism, or I must try better. I can't, striving for perfection and things. And those are often the parental voices that we have inside us from childhood.
Just thinking about it, it's a case of you're saying this and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I guess I already knew that, because that's the reason why we want to reparent ourselves, is to become better in ourselves, but also be better parents to our children as well. And we want to be that positive voice that's in that child.
Yeah, exactly. I often talk to parents about how they want to be a better parent. And that might have been why they've come to therapy, or that's why they're seeking books, or that's why they're listening to this podcast, or whatever. They want to do it to be better. And that's a perfectly, understandable and noble thing. But you also have value in yourself, to look after yourself aside from your parenting role, if that makes sense. Like, you, in your own right, you deserve to, have a voice where you can listen to yourself, where you can, validate your own feelings. And then that in turn helps in your parenting when things get tough.
And I think that voice that you're mentioning, that's lost when we become a parent, through sleep deprivation and through the unknowingness of becoming a parent and not having your core support network with you, I guess. The fact that that voice then is going to be raising very easily, I guess, in our heads. And so that's why parents, especially of kids maybe even under 1, are getting these voices in our head so much, I guess.
Yeah, it's also just being a parent, being, first time parent, second time, whatever. You're new at something again. And when we're new at things, that's just really difficult. And we can often criticize ourselves for making what we might perceive as errors or mistakes, or not getting something right, or losing our temper, or feeling full of rage, or not breastfeeding when you wanted to. There's so many points that are pinch points for feeling bad about yourself just in parenting. And there's also the understanding that at different age points of your child, be it a baby in arms or a temper tantrum 3-year-old or a teenager, whatever, you will get activated often just on a bodily level as to what that experience was like for you when you were a child. And that's what can sometimes feel really hard to understand. Yeah, it just sometimes feels like a sort of a bolt from the blue kind of thing, like, oh, this is a big feeling that doesn't necessarily belong to the here and now. It's a sort of a trigger from the past.
What I find super challenging when you said that we are doing this the first time, so we don't have a pattern for that. And then for my experience on top of that, because I don't want to repeat the patterns that are engraved in me, I have like a double blind side, because I have the blind side of the first time experience where I cannot fall into a pattern. And then I can't even fall into the pattern that I know from my past, because I don't want to repeat that. So it's like this double pressure of, I have this new situation. I know I cannot rely on the pattern I know from my past, but I also don't have a new one. So what am I going to do now? And then it is so hard to remind myself, do not go in the pattern that you don't want to go back into. Don't do it. Don't do it. And for me, usually that lasts 20 minutes. And unless the situation is resolved, then I do tap back into these bad patterns. And that was also a big thing for me to realize when I was seeing also my husband parent, that he grew up very differently than I did from how his parents parented him. So he doesn't even fall back into the bad patterns because they're not engraved in him. And I was always feeling like a triple failure. So, okay, I don't know what to do. I have this bad pattern. And then on top of this, my husband, he doesn't even get to the point. And it took me so long to realize, yeah, because there's different patterns for him going on that I can't access because I don't have them. So that's always this whole big thing where you have this layer and layer. And then in the situation when you're dealing with a tantrum and screaming, and then it just becomes to a point where it's like, what's going on? Like, I'm like out of my mind, my toddler's out of their mind. And it's this whole big chaos where it's a total shutdown.
Yeah. And for me, I think the biggest point in what you're saying is that you've got the failure as you might perceive it, and then the double layer of like, I said I wasn't going to do this. I said I wasn't going to shout like my mum shouted. Here I am shouting, oh, I'm a failure again. And actually the real true antidote to that is to be compassionate to yourself, which in those moments feels so hard. Like, how can I be kind to myself when I've clearly failed so much? And you're in this sort of whoosh, swirling shame pit going deeper and deeper into how awful you are. But really the only thing that can bring you out of that is acknowledging that you're trying your best. And if you're already trying to do different to what the parenting you had, that's really like a considerable effort. And then to know, okay, I'm trying my best here, but I did lose my temper and I shouted and I feel so awful, but I'm going to try better next time. I'm going to apologize to my child. I'm going to get a nice hot cup of tea and soothe myself because I'm obviously feeling overwhelmed. And actually those moments where you have opportunity to be compassionate rather than critical are what makes you less likely to get into that bad habit, as you said before, or bad kind of when you feel triggered. And to acknowledge that that is going to happen, that children do trigger us because of so many factors. But there's also just on a sensory level, I find myself, if there's just been too much sensory overload, there's too much noise, there's shouting, there's music on the background, there's whatever it is, I know that I need to kind of reduce my sensory input. And I've recently got some headphones and like earplugs, so I can still hear everything, but it sort of dulls things down. And that felt to me to be a compassionate move, because I probably spent the last year or so getting really wound up in these moments where two kids shouting, and actually be like, okay, that's what I need to do. That's reparenting. That's noticing that I'm getting triggered in these moments, feeling overwhelmed. What can I do to help myself? And sort of say, it's okay to need that.
Yeah, the biggest step so there's these two different things that had happened. So one was when I'm getting into the mode and I tap back into the pattern where I then kind of watch myself from the outside, because I feel myself becoming my parent. And then I notice that while I'm doing it, and then I see my child, I'm like, okay, so I am the child right now because I am my parent, but I am myself with it's like this whole double layer of things and I think that makes it even tricky because you realize what you're doing. I can only speak for my parents. I can say my parents didn't realize what they were doing. They were just doing it, and I do it and I realize it. And then that makes it extra hard because you're like, but you see that this is wrong. So why are you doing it? Because I have the realization of this is not how I want to react and this is not how you should react. So this is like this double layer. But then for me, one thing that has helped me a lot was that even if I tap into this energy and I'm not fully going into, because there are some boundaries where I just can't cross them, and then I can apologize. And that has been so healing for me that I said, okay, even though I'm touching upon those patterns, I can be this person who can own up to their mistakes and be like, I'm so sorry, and explain my feelings. I got super loud. I got frustrated. And I said to my daughter, I didn't know what to do. I did not know what to do. And that's when I got so loud because I was scared. Mm-hmm. And then she understood. And then we made up. And that's this process every time. And this is also that shows you that your children love you so much, because she accepts my apology. She sometimes needs her time, but then this is where you see your children love you unconditionally, when you can come to them and they will always welcome you back with open arms and be like, I love you, mommy. I love you. And let's move on from that. And that has been very healing for me to see that apology happen and then really this repairing happen after this. And then every time we do this, the next 10, like it gets less and less and less bad, because we know, let's meet at a point of connection. Let's repair.
Yeah. And that repair, that apology, you are also repairing your inner child. You are saying sorry for the things that your parents didn't see, couldn't see, wouldn't see. And to actually, in noticing and saying sorry to your child that you lost your temper or whatever, you're actually healing something in yourself that's kind of saying, that wasn't okay that I was treated like that. Sort of saying something really kind and gentle to your child is doing that to yourself as well.
Can I ask a question? Because it's not for everyone. It might be for some different families around the world. When this is happening, when we do the repairing, when we do the apologizing, when we're talking to our children, when we're kind of raising them up nearly to be not just an equal, but there's something in me that's kind of worried that this is parentifying a child. And that's not for everyone, but it's just a case of there's something in me that's kind of like, am I doing this? Am I bringing them up to a level they're not meant to be at yet? And that's always something in the back of my head of like how to manage the situation. Should I go to this extent, like Maren was saying? Should I go there and just do all that? Or should I be containing it a bit more because, you know, your child is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever?
Yeah, I hear that worry. I think what I would come back to time and again is having respect for a child. And that's the respect for their developmental level, wherever they are. If they're 1, you know, you can still repair, you know, you can say like, oh, I got a bit stressed there. No, I got a bit cross, or I raised my voice. You know, they might not necessarily get it, but they're getting that you respect. And then as they get older, they might have more understanding about, you know, you're actually teaching them how to manage their feelings as well and how to have that rupture and repair in themselves when you're doing that. Yeah, I think in historical generations, you know, my parents' generation and whatnot, I think respect often looked one way, that there was a kind of expectation that children needed to be obedient, quiet, maybe have kind of easier feelings, you know, be kind of happy most of the time. Things like anger and tempers and stuff weren't really tolerated so much. And actually, I think that ends up parentifying children. If we're thinking about children having to behave older than they are, you know, you might have a 4-year-old who feels like they can't express how angry they are that the banana wasn't right or something because they might upset their parent. That's actually then not allowing them the normal child big feelings. Does that sort of make sense, Eva?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. As I said, it's like, it's just a question that is always in me because it's a case of, as Maren said, it's like, I do apologize to my child. I think communication is the biggest problem personally for me, is the fact that I just shut down. That's my way of dealing with something. And that's the thing, like with the reparenting thing, it's a case of, okay, break generational cycle, be kind to myself. How am I being kind to myself plus being kind to my child in this moment? And like Maren says, and she's a great example of this, is because she really always has managed this, where she's always apologized. She's always been open with her daughter. She's very much in that they've got this nice, there's phrases that they use together, like that is so sweet to hear. Like her daughter repeats it to her and it's like, wow. But it's because Maren's done this for a long period of time and she's really she's stuck with it. And I think some of us might be kind of a bit stuck in ourselves of kind of going, how do I communicate that? Because we don't have the language. We don't understand the boundaries. We don't understand what it is basically to be an actual parent, because we only have the blueprint of our own parents, because there's not a general blueprint. We only have one set of parents that we learn from. And so now to reparent ourselves is to be kind to ourselves whilst doing the act of parenting an actual human while trying to also reparent ourselves. And it's quite a struggle, I guess is the only way to put it.
Yeah, a massive struggle. And yeah, I think the most important thing is to kind of understand, I think, initially what those feelings are, what feels hard enough, do some kind of learning yourself so that you can help your child to learn eventually in time. Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of, just working out, what does it feel like when I get angry with my child or I shut down? What does that feel like? What's that message for me? What do I need to do to manage that? And then the sort of helping your child out bit will happen in time. Yeah, I sometimes think of, we're a bit like a sort of, as parents, like an ecosystem for our child. You know, if you want a plant to grow, they need healthy soil and sunlight, or they might need time in a greenhouse, you know, whatever. And whoever's parenting as well, are like that ecosystem for the child. And the child can't grow if like the soil's not good, if you're not kind of putting into it what it needs to grow. And I think a big part of that is just like making sure you're putting the things in place so that the plant can thrive. And I think part of that is the reparenting, but part of it is also the sort of practical things that we've come back to time and again on these podcasts of just like, am I getting enough rest? Am I getting enough air? Am I getting enough food? And, you know, that's part of the ecosystem as well. You know, am I fighting a lot with my partner? Is that not helping the plant to grow? You know, lots of factors.
When you're saying this, it actually reminds me of, there's a Japanese, I don't know if he's scientist, Masaru Emoto, and he was the guy, I can't remember if it started with ice. I think it was ice. Not really sure, but basically he did this thing where people now do it with rice to show their children. So they put rice and water into the different containers and they talk positively to one and negatively to another. And the negative one kind of gets a bit of mold, whereas the positive one is actually doing better. Since I heard that a while ago, I remember just being like, it makes sense, because like we spoke about earlier, is like the voices in your head are basically, it's just a natural thing that's in your head and that's what you're going to hear. And so when you pour positive into it, those are going to be what people hear then from then on.
Yeah.
And it was just, it's a nice thing that, yeah, just when you were talking about it there, I was like, oh yeah, that Japanese dude.
Yeah. There's a lot of power in that, or just kind of acknowledging that there might be another record that you could play for yourself that's not just this, critical, you haven't done good enough voice. Actually, it could be like, yeah, okay, I'm doing a good job, or that was hard and we got through it, or something that's not necessarily positive versus negative, but it's more kind of realistic and true to the job, which is really hard. Being a parent's really, really hard.
When you say realistic, one thing that has happened, and because when these big things happen, then I immediately think this is the new normal. This is how it's going to be every time. But then when we had an incident, and then I said this, what if the next time she doesn't want to do it again? Or what if I'm alone then? And then my husband said, it happened once today. So let's worry about this one time today. This is not going to be the new normal. So this reality check from outside, like it's an isolated incident that has happened now. Let's not make it this whole panic mode of this is how it's going to be forever and ever, and it's never going to end, and it's never going to get different again. And then really checking, okay, this was today. How is it going to be tomorrow? We've had this routine, so we can fall back into the normal routine. But it's so hard, and I find it very helpful if you have someone from outside who gives you a reality check and says, let's not overreact. This is today.
Yeah. And it might be that sort of catastrophic thinking or sort of projecting in the future was a way of keeping yourself safe when you were a child, that can feel quite, even though there's lots of worry around, it can feel quite sort of safe, or you do what you can. And then it's sort of becoming a parent that's taught you that actually that's not helpful right now in this role to sort of project the bad things into the future. And so it can also like allow you to see your patterns differently and see like what's helpful in this moment.
Yeah. And also seeing what else is there. I've come across this nice video that said, let's say you think my child is so difficult. And what else is true? They're also funny. They're also loving. They're also this, they're also that. And they are also difficult at some times. And that has helped me also, this whole thing of when I'm getting into the mode where I see my child and I can only see the rage, the anger, the like fighting. And then I have to remind myself, and all the other good stuff is also in her. It's just not at the front row right now, but we laugh. She's so funny. She's so smart. She's so kind. Like, this is all there. It's just on the back burner right now, and I can't see it, but I have to remind myself, and also for myself, when now the rage is out, now the frustration is out. And at the same time, the love is there, the compassion is there, the empathy is somewhere in me, and I can access it later at another point and get back to that.
Yeah. In narrative therapy, which I use quite a lot, it's the same thing. It's kind of like the child is not the problem, the problem's the problem. Or, you put the adult is not the problem, because you can get so problem focused. And actually the story, the narrative you tell yourself is that I'm having a problem. My child is difficult in whatever reason. And to sort of strengthen the strengths and sort of widen out that lens a bit can be so helpful. And what's the kind of untold story there? What's the narrative you're not really listening to? The child has got lots of great strengths and qualities, and at the moment they're having a problem with sleep or whatever, but it's not everything about them.
So I'm just thinking about some of the suggestions you've spoken there about how to reparent yourself. So obviously the first one was self-compassion. You said like that's priority, basically. Honoring your feelings. You said, to go back to actually listen to yourself and to acknowledge what's actually been there, being patient with yourself. Just as you said with the example, there is kind of a case of looking at the situation itself, but kind of just being like, okay, it's not just this. No tunnel vision, like let's expand it. Working towards consistency is like just repetition is basically going to be quite a key on this. And that's like the hardest part, because when we're talking about this consistency, we're talking about 18 years with a child or even 25 years, because it's
but your whole life is yourself.
Yeah.
In like if you're reparenting yourself, you're doing it for life, for yourself forever. To be able to push things differently.
What else did you say there? Yeah. Releasing the blame, the fact that it's a case of parents feel like it's their responsibility for the children's shortcomings. And you're saying, no, like when Maren was given the example, it's a case of, this is the situation it is. That, as you say, your narrative therapy, where it's a case of, okay, yes, she is this way, but that's right now, but she's also X, Y, and Z as well. And then obviously you also said the self-care. Are you sleeping? Are you hydrated? Are you eating? Like all of these kind of things. It's actually quite an extensive list you've just actually already given us.
Yeah, and not any of those points are not easy. I suppose we could sit here and be like, oh, self-compassion. Like self-compassion is really hard to notice the pain and to be kind to yourself in amongst the pain is really, really like a big learning that takes a lot of time, can take a lot of conversation, a lot of soul searching. It's easier to do what comes quick that might have been, in parenting might have been done to us, say something, criticize yourself, shout, whatever it is. That's a far easier route. I sometimes think of it like a motorway, and the self-compassion is like a wiggly country road to get to the same point. You'll get there, but you've really got to put the effort in and the kindness, but it works. It pays dividends in the end. And I think if we're ultimately, I'd say quite universally, I don't know, wanting our children to be kind, empathic, resilient people, if they see us when we make perceived mistakes or do something wrong, criticize ourselves or be like, oh God, or like strive for perfection all the time, they'll learn that. And they learn far more from what they see in modeling rather than what we tell them. And yeah, I think that's a big part of reparenting as well, isn't it? Just kind of acknowledging that your children are watching you and that they're modeling their behavior and what they see from you. But not that to be a stick to beat yourself with, but actually to be like a nice kind of stepping stone that you can do it together, that you're growing up together.
One thing that I have also noticed was that when the situation arises and I'm in the relationship with my child, and then I fall back into the patterns of my parents, that there's also lots of work happening between the relationship between me and my parents, because then I really have to work to not get angry towards my parents and blame them, like, why did you engrave these patterns in me? Why did you not parent me differently so I can parent my child how I want to parent them right now? And that is also this whole thing of where I really have to watch myself that I don't fall into this blame pattern then towards my parents, when I know, not going to excuse what they did, but at the same time, I can, with the knowledge and the distance that I have now, see where this is coming from, which doesn't excuse it, but makes me understand it. And so this is then the anchor that I hold on to not get into the pattern of, why did you fuck me up? So now I have to deal with this. Kind of like just saying it in a very extreme way, but this is what pops in my head. Like, why do I have to deal with this? Why were my parents not able to gentle parent me so I can gentle parent now? And like, this is also a very hard part of this whole reparenting, also repairing your relationship with your parents and heal that.
Yeah. And I do believe that parents did the best that they knew how to do in the context that they were in, historical context, families, stress, wars, whatever. And that best still might not have been good enough. But I don't think that anybody goes into parenting thinking that they're going to do a crap job. I think they're trying their best, and that cannot be enough. Yeah. And it's very easy to get into those blame cycle, but it's sort of it's helpful to understand where they were coming from and not excuse it, but use it as, again, like a stepping stone into what you can do differently and what you want to pass on and what you absolutely don't.
I did see something, and I don't know if it was probably Instagram or something like that, and I can't remember if it was just a picture or if it was a video, but when you're talking there, Maren, it really just came back to me, and it just says, generationally, as Naomi was saying, like, everyone has their ways of parenting in that moment, and they didn't know they were doing any wrong. But it takes actually someone of strength to stand up and say, I'm actually going to break this. And it's actually, they're acknowledging everything that goes before them, and they're taking a stand to say, I know this is wrong. And it was just, I don't know what about it, but I was like, our parents, whatever they went through, they just did exactly what they were meant to do. But it's now, and in my understanding, when I was doing a little research on the reparenting thing, when I was looking at Google Trends, for example, this started in 2004. It's actually since mid-July 2019 that there's been an uptake on the reparenting search engine of worldwide. And I was kind of thinking, okay, what's going on out there? Like, what was triggering this Google searching? And I was trying to reflect on, like, people becoming parents. So these were people who were probably born in the late 80s, early 90s potentially. And they had a very different upbringing than people who were born in the early 80s or the 70s and so on and so forth. And so the world actually became a little easier. There was internet then. The world had opened up. We had the single market in Europe. We had a lot of new products coming around. Life became a lot easier. Whereas prior to that, I would say life was quite like the Vincent van Gogh potato era, where everything's just brown and depressing to look at. That's how I pictured it. That it was like, that's basically, and I'm from Ireland, so I can definitely say this, the potato era. But it was just like, that's how kind of it feels to me, that I'm wondering if the reason the uptake of reparenting was researched in 2019 is because of these people who were born in a certain period of time going, I'm not going to do this, or my parents were a little bit better, or a little bit more open, or a little bit more exposed. And then also obviously through social media and through finding out global trends. And equally, as international families, we are now traveling the world. We're seeing how other people are parenting. We're seeing how other cultures parent as well. And so, yeah, that was the thing that was interesting for me in this research of kind of like, okay, I only found out about reparenting because I became a parent. I probably don't know if I would have known about it or thought about it otherwise. So,
and you might not have had the daily, sometimes several times daily triggers that make you think about that. And it's not that you can suddenly, it's not a choice, I don't think, this work. It's like a feeling that you get of just being like, oh, this is not right, or I reacted this way again. And that makes you kind of want to find out more about it.
Yeah, because you're reliving your childhood, basically, because you're watching your child, who equally is either a mirror of you as a child, or it's a person who you're doing so much for. And you're like, damn, you've got a lot more than I had as a child. Why are you complaining? Kind of, there's this kind of different aspect that we're like, it makes us reflect, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was just interesting. And then I was actually looking at blogs, podcasts, and books released. And I don't know if it is because of it, but Dr. Becky's Good Inside was released 2 months prior to this whole Google search peak. So I don't know if it was in relation to that, because obviously a book release doesn't explode immediately.
The reasons why she wrote that book as well were probably because it was coming more in kind of cultural parlance and people thinking about it more as well.
Yeah, and as a clinician like yourself, you're hearing from the people. Like, you basically, when you're sitting talking to the people, you're actually doing the groundwork. You're actually out there hearing what people are saying, and and doing the work myself daily. Yeah, and just thinking about that, when you said like, oh, what are you complaining about or something, you got it much better than me. That feeling, a very true feeling of envy that can come from that. I've definitely been envious of my children, that I have the space to acknowledge what I didn't have, and I can think differently, and I can not just immediately shout them or shame them or those things, that I can actually help them with that. And with that comes like you don't appreciate this effort that I'm putting in. That can feel kind of a difficult feeling as well. But I sort of then go back to my own inner child, the historical version of me. It's like, you're giving to them what you didn't have, and how special that is, and actually how healing it is for me as well. So it's like there's so many layers of how helpful it can be. I don't know. I'm just paused for thought there. You are reliving your childhood, but then maybe it's a case of you're getting to enjoy it. You're getting to enjoy it through the eyes of a parent, but also the eyes of a child. But equally, it's a case of you're not reliving your childhood through your child as well, because that's also an extremely dangerous thing that no parent should really do, living your fantasies basically through your own child.
Yeah, but I think it also taps into the sort of joy and lightness and excitement that can come, that's so healing for your inner child as well, of being with children. Just like play and laughter and dance and silliness that you don't often allow yourself in adulthood. That's reparenting. That's saying like it's okay to have fun and be silly, and whatever play looks like.
Yeah, I have been caught playing with my daughter out in public by a friend of myself and Maren's. She's caught me like jumping around or being stupid, and I remember just like going, oh no, and you kind of go back to your rigid like, oh no, just play with the child, I'm cool or whatever. But it is that thing, indeed, as you say. I enjoy that because you get that feeling of giddiness sometimes with your child, that you get to act stupid, whatever it is. So yeah,
especially if that wasn't so allowed in your family growing up. Perhaps you needed to be quiet, or perhaps there were stresses or something that felt like silly childlike behavior was not always tolerated.
Yeah, this reparenting is quite of a lot of emotional regulation, I guess. It's a lot of work.
I thought this was super helpful what you just said. So I'm jumping in because I was like thinking about this, the whole, when you said yes, also these joyful moments, they are also the reparenting. And I just realized, like, for me, sometimes I think about reparenting when I think about the difficult situations. like, this is where I have to like heal now, and where I have to repair, and where I have to do all of that. And then when you said this, like, yeah, but reparenting is also when you can be silly and you can play and you play with them. And then it made so much sense to me, because I don't recall my parents playing with me, like sitting there and playing, like, I don't know, supermarket or painting with me and all that. Other people did that with me, and I did this in daycare and other places. And now I do this a lot with my child. And now when you said this, I was like, that's true. Yeah, I get to reparent myself also in these joyful moments where we run around the kitchen and we sing songs and we make up languages and we do all that. And this is just, yeah, I don't know, just wanted to share. This really helped me when you said this, to see that and be like, oh yeah, this is also where I can repair, like where I can give this joy back into my childhood, into my inner child, where I can fill this cup, and not just, it's not always just the hard stuff and we go back into our inner child when we have all this difficult time, but also when we have the lightness and the silliness, and yeah, just like being ourselves and in the moment, and just, yeah, being light. A really nice remark. Yes, it makes a lot of sense to me.
I think we're going to wrap that up then here on a very positive note, actually. So that's quite a nice way to end, I guess. Yeah, reparenting is not going to be easy. And as Naomi said, it's basically for life. Once you become a parent, basically, it's going to be for the rest of your life. And yeah, in a nice way, it's not through the dark times, it's through the joyous times, okay, as well. Thank you, Dr. Naomi. This has actually been really nice to kind of, I don't know if it's to be seen or to be heard, but it's just the fact that like I could see myself and Maren both nodding, because we know quite a lot about each other's personal lives, and the two of us like, okay. Oh, that's good to know.
I see you.
So yeah, thank you as always, Dr. Naomi. You can find Dr. Naomi on Instagram at The Good Enough Psychologist, and she also runs group therapy for moms,
of which we're starting today. No, next week, February 7th. So actually, it will have already started by the time this goes out. Yeah. But yeah, it's always around.
It's always around. So you keep an eye on her Instagram. You'll be able to keep an eye on when the next group is. Group therapy is very handy to also meet other moms who are actually going through it as well, which is also quite a prevalent element, I guess, of reparenting, is actually finding healthy relationships with other people who are potentially going through the same thing.
Yeah,
like
and hearing,
Maren.
Me too. I have this, or that can immediately stop the shame that you might feel, is somebody saying, yeah, I get that. I'm struggling. This is hard. Let's work it out.
It's good to be seen. That's basically the whole idea of Damn Parenting Podcast, is basically to share the community with everyone, to know that, hey, you're not alone. We're all going through this with you in whatever element it is, through therapy or through doctors or whatever it is. Where, you know, someone out there is actually going through something like you, and you're not alone. Even though you're an international family living here and you don't have your usual support network, there is actually someone out there. And, you know, we're hopefully going to be shining lights on all different aspects of what you might be needing. Do drop us a line on Instagram, on YouTube, Spotify, whatever it is, to let us know if there's some topic you would like us to cover, if there's any questions you want answered. And I think I'm going to hand this over to Maren, as she's the professional in the ending.
So every Wednesday, as you know, we drop another expert episode. And every other Monday, we also dive into a little more private conversation with our damn chats. So keep an eye out for those as well, to make sure that we keep the work up with this podcast and we keep growing. Make sure that you forward this episode to someone who you think this might be helpful. Give us a like on Spotify, Instagram, and YouTube for podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Activate the bell so you get a tone when we are out with another episode. That's all the advertisement we need to do. And now it's up to you to share, subscribe, and like us. And we will hear you on the next episode.
For now, we say thank you and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.